Hello friends, Matthew here from Grey Army Gaming. If you were just joining us now for this series, the idea behind what we're doing here is improvisational storytelling. Almost everything that you will see in the next few minutes is entirely improvised with promptings from Rory's story cubes. What that means is that the narrative may be a little bit non-linear, it may be a bit strange, but hopefully it will be fresh and exciting. Thank you for joining us and for following us in this story of Quantum Apocalypse. With a loud bang, Ven was suddenly woken from his sleep. He looked over at the door and he saw no movement. He looked down at his watch. 5 a.m. Who is banging at my door at 5 a.m.? But this really wasn't that strange. You see, Ven lives in the student housing area of the University of Lund, and it's not unusual for students to be up late into the evening and the early morning of a Friday and Saturday, playing music, dancing, banging on random doors. But this was particularly difficult for Ven tonight because he had come home so late last night, well after 2 a.m., where he had been working late into the evening, researching and preparing for the deadline that he needed to meet. You see, in 2 weeks, the European Council for Energy was going to be paying a visit to the university here in Lund, to the physics department in particular, where each professor and their research assistant were expected to present on the work that they had been doing. And the deadline is coming up quickly. Ven has been rather stressed. Sleep, however, came over him once again, and he drifted off. What felt like only a few minutes was actually a couple of hours before he was awoken again by another bang. This time he jumped up and sat up in his bed and looked over at the door. And there, standing in his running shoes and his running clothes, a tall, well-groomed man that he immediately recognized as his roommate, Thijs. Thijs is a student from the Niels Bohr Institute in Copenhagen who was also studying at the university here in Lund in the physics department under a different professor. And they decided that they would be roommates together. And it has worked out quite well. They've had a very good partnership. They've been able to help one another through the difficult process of being a graduate student and a research assistant at the university. Well, Thijs looked over at Ven with something of a wry, sarcastic smile. Good morning, princess, he said as he laughed to himself, and Ven shot him back a look with daggers, not so impressed by being woken up again. Thijs took one more step closer to him and tossed a package onto Ven's bed. This was outside the door. You got some sort of package? Ven looked down. A rather nondescript package, brown paper wrapping, and there on the front was his name, Ven Petersgard. And he immediately could feel around the edge that it was a book. He could feel the spine and the pages. Ever since Ven has started working as a research assistant, he's been getting so many books for review and for course literature, people wanting him to use their books. He just hasn't had enough time to look at all these. He took the package and tossed it over in the corner into the pile of other books there that he hasn't gotten to yet. Thijs, giggling at this, walked through the hallway into the bathroom, locked the door, and started turning the water on to take a shower. And Ven knew that it was time to wake up. So he walked into their kitchen, stumbling in, still exhausted after his night of research, into their sparsely decorated kitchen. There's one red chair there and a white chair, mismatched chairs, and another table mismatched. But most importantly, in the corner was the coffee machine. He walked over and hit the little red button, and immediately the coffee began to funnel and drip into the pot, and the scent of coffee hit his nose and his brain was immediately woken up. He opened the cupboard and pulled down his favorite black mug that had the Einstein E=mc² quote on it. A mug that his mother had actually purchased for him 2 years ago when he left Minnesota, the University of Minnesota, to come and study here in Lund. He filled up his coffee cup with hot coffee and walked over to the window and looked out the window. The light was amazing. Here in June in Sweden, the light is always incredible. It comes up early in the morning, 4 a.m., and it casts a beautiful shine across the entire landscape. And Ven was reminded of why he came to this beautiful place. He'd always wanted to come back to Sweden to visit it. He'd never been here before, and he always wanted to come back and visit the place that his ancestors were from, Petersgard. He didn't really know much about his family, but he really felt like there was something about Sweden that was drawing him back here. After finishing half of his cup of coffee, he walked over to the refrigerator and opened it up to get some breakfast, and realizing once again that he is a student without any money, there is no breakfast. So he decided that he would take the little cash he had left in his pocket and head down to his local coffee shop and get some breakfast. He stumbled out of their front door and stumbled down the stairs and took the path leading to the center square. And when he got to the center square, he was reminded once again of how beautiful this place was, how there's a sort of magnetism in this medieval city of all these medieval artifacts surrounding him, beautiful buildings with medieval arches and windows and beautiful cobblestone where people would sit and discuss ideas together and drink coffee in the squares, and it's just an incredible feel of medieval Europe that he just loved. And there in the corner of the square was his quiet, little sleepy coffee shop. The coffee shop known as the Mushroom. He walked over to the coffee shop, and as he walked in, he startled the barista who was frantically working to get together the orders. And she saw him walk in and said, "Oh, hey, it's a big boy." And no problem, he said, as he waited in line, as she frantically threw together drinks and got people their cakes and their other things that they were eating. And he ordered his typical bagel with cream cheese, and he went and sat down in the corner underneath a beautiful painting of an evening scape of the city of Lund with the moonlight shining down on the cathedral. And he started to eat his bagel, but once again sleep started to overcome him, and he found himself drifting off, his head slowly coming down and resting on his arm on the table. After a few seconds, Ven was awoken again, but this time awoken by a rumble in his pocket. It was his phone that was going off. And he pulled his phone out and looked, and there on the caller ID he saw Professor Jacobsson. Well, this is important, probably. I mean, why would he call me on a Saturday morning? So Ven swiped right and answered the phone. "Hello, this is Ven," he said. And he waited. Silence on the other end, except for he could hear a quiet breathing. "Hello? Hello, this is Ven," he said once again. And then he heard a quiet voice on the other end. "Ven, this is Jacobsson." "Hello?" said Ven. "Jacobsson, Ven, I need to talk to you tonight. Can you come 11 o'clock? Come to the laboratory. Come to the back door. I need to talk to you about something very important." Click. Nothing on the other end. Strange, thought Ven. What an odd exchange. But at the same time, he wasn't that surprised by this, because Professor Jacobsson is known for being a bit eccentric. He's a rather tall man with white bushy hair that flies out everywhere. He has the same old tweed suits on that he wears every day at the laboratory with the same leather patches, same shirts. I think he probably only has 2 or 3 of these shirts that he wears every day with the same ugly tie. He's rather eccentric. Not only in how he looks, but also in how he is perceived by others. You see, Jacobsson has had a lot of problems at the university, a lot of troubles, because of what people see as his rather unorthodox ideas. Unorthodox ideas about dark matter and dark energy. the ideas that are the basis of his research, but that have not really been embraced by his colleagues. Ven remembered the first summer that he was here 2 years ago, that he went to a conference where Professor Jacobsson was presenting a paper. When Jacobsson had finished, one of the other professors there, Dr. Grenqvist, went forward to the microphone to ask a question, and he threw out this accusation, an accusation that has been repeated many times in the physics department, that what Professor Jacobsson is doing is not physics, but it's speculative philosophy. Jacobsson has become something of a loner, something of an eccentric. But at the same time, he kind of thrives in that position. And this is the person that Ven has been paired with. So, of course, not strange to get a phone call like this. After finishing up his bagel, Ven decided that he would kill some time by walking over to the university library. He likes to spend a lot of his downtime in the library, perusing the stacks and looking at the different books, reading the newspapers. They have some international newspapers there. He can read about things that are happening in America, back in Minnesota where he grew up, where his mother is still living today. And as he left the cafe, the Mushroom, turned the corner in the narrow alleyway, following the paving stones, the old medieval paving stones where you could see marks from the old carts that used to run through here into the square where they would bring their wares to sell. And he followed the little path and saw popping out from another corner the beautiful cathedral in the town. And he decided, instead of going around the back side of the cathedral like he usually does up to the university library, that he would walk around the front and get another shot of this amazing structure. And as he walked around the front, he saw once again the two rising towers with their gray stone that had been around for hundreds of years, that had been worn down with gray and black and different shades of yellows and browns, years and years of rain and weathering that had made this cathedral really look like a Gothic masterpiece. And the beautiful front door that was slightly ajar with massive wood planks and rusted old metal bolts with large hooks on them and a massive handle on the front of the door. And as he walked past the door, he heard the faint sound of music. An organist inside preparing for tomorrow's service. And he immediately recognized the song as it reverberated through the large stone structure. It was Mozart's Requiem. And immediately, Ven was taken back to his childhood. He had heard that sound over and over many times as a child when he was at his grandmother's house. It was shortly after the death of his grandfather, Yuan, that his grandmother, Mora, would lock herself in her bedroom, and for hours upon hours on her old gramophone, she would play Mozart's Requiem again and again and again, and she would weep in her bedroom. Her family had experienced a lot of death. Yuhan's death, but also the death of her son, Ven's own father. Ven really never understood much about this. He never really got any information about how any of this happened. I think his grandmother and his mother wanted to protect him. So all of this was to him still a bit of a mystery, but he still could remember the haunting sounds of Requiem coming from the bedroom of his grandmother, Mora. After a few minutes, after walking from the cathedral, he made his way up to the library. Also a beautiful medieval building with red brick. And he walked into the front door and immediately could see the stacks of books in front of him. He always felt at home in libraries. He loved this place. Whenever he had extra time, like he said, he would come and do some digging down and do some research in other subjects. It felt like he always had some sort of ghost of the humanities hanging behind him, pushing him to do research in the humanities. And as he turned around the first corner into the stacks where he usually went to grab his newspapers, he suddenly was confronted by a face, someone breathing heavily. And he looked up, and there he saw Dr. Greenquist. Is it Ven here? I see. Ven sort of gave a bit of a skeptical look. Good to see you, Dr. Greenquist, he said. Dr. Greenquist put his face even closer to Ven's, their noses almost touching, him smelling of the smell of garlic that he had eaten probably for breakfast that morning. Ven, you need to watch out for that Professor Jacobsson. He is a bit of a wild card. Stay away from him. Be careful. And of course, if you ever want to do research, real research I mean, in the university, you're always welcome to my area of the department. And with that, he gave a bit of a chuckle and walked away. Ven was a bit taken aback by this, not so excited by the animosity that is in the university between Greenquist and Jacobsson. But he brushed it off and walked over and picked up the newspaper and started to sit down and read. And Ven, of course, was immediately, his mind drifted again back to his childhood, to all of the things that his mother and father used to say to him. He had a very vague memory of his father. He used to play baseball with his father. They used to go out and throw the ball around, and that was really the only memory he had of his father. He was quite young when his father died. He didn't know much about him. His father, Abraham. His mother never talked about Abraham. She never really talked to him about his death. All he knew was that somehow he had died and the family had moved on. And it was far too painful, I think, for the mother to talk about. So Ven never asked questions. He never dig down deeper into who his father was and why he had suddenly died. Outside the library, Ven could hear the slight pitter-patter of the rain as it began to fall. The thing about Sweden is that you never know when rain will come, and now the rain had been falling, and Ven was instantly carried off into a sort of meditative state where once again he drifted off to sleep. Once again he was awoken, this time by a pat on his shoulder. He looked up behind him, and there standing was a younger female student looking down at him rather intently. He wiped his eyes a little bit and looked back at her, sort of wondering what it is she wanted. Ursäkta mig, jag vill inte störa, men jag tänkte vi ska stänga biblioteket om en kvart. Jag tänkte att jag skulle bara påminna dig att det är dags för dig att packa upp dina grejer och ta dig ut ur dörren. And Ven looked up. Of course, he didn't understand much Swedish. He'd only been here for a couple of years. And he said, I guess I'm sorry. What did you say? Excuse me, I'm sorry. She said, the library is going to be closing in 15 minutes. So I just wanted to ask you if you would please pick up your things and take them and begin to pack up. We would very much appreciate that. Thank you. And Ven, 15 minutes? Well, I thought the library closes at 11. And he looked down at his watch. And indeed, she was right. 10:45 p.m. And Ven suddenly got panicked. He was supposed to meet Jacobsson at 11 o'clock, and the laboratory was on the other side of the university. So he quickly grabbed his coat, thanked the woman, and ran out the front door. He had to get to the bus stop in order to get across town to the other side of town, because the other laboratory, the Max 4 laboratory, where he was doing his research, the synchrotronic radiation facility, is on the other side of town in Brunsberg, and he had to get there within 15 minutes if he was going to meet Jacobsson. So he quickly ran down to the road and waited by the bus station there. And fortunately enough, within a couple minutes, bus number 5 came, and he jumped on the bus and started to head out to Brunsberg. And as he was on the bus, his heart was racing because he, of course, didn't want to disappoint Professor Jacobsson. And the bus was rather empty. It was, of course, 10:45 at night, but there was a man sitting there reading a book. And on the front cover of the book were two strange things. There was an etching into the leather of a large tree. And next to the tree, a shield. A shield on it that had a flame, a fire on it. And the man was intensely reading the book, and then couldn't take his eyes off the man. A strange shaved head and a strange earring on the right ear. And then the man, sensing he was being watched, looked up and locked eyes with Ven. Gave him a slight smile and went back to his book. The bus had finally arrived at the stop, and Ven, a little perturbed by this, hopped out of the bus and started to run over to the Max 4 laboratory. And in the distance you could see the beautiful large stainless steel silver ring that is part of the particle acceleration device in this laboratory. And in the center of the large ring that is the particle acceleration device, it is the largest in fact in Europe of its kind, the largest in the world, was the tower where the office buildings were. And Ven knew that he had to run around the back side of this facility, around the ring, to get to the back door where Professor Jacobsson wanted him to come and meet him. So he walked all the way around the rings and through the trees and the hills that they had built, the artificial landscaping that they had done to try and give this a more homey, a more organic feel, despite all the metal and the glass that comprised the structure. And eventually Ven had made it to the back door. And he went over, pulled out his key access card that he usually uses, but the door was strangely ajar. This was a strange thing for Ven, because they're usually pretty good with security in the building, but he didn't think twice, but pushed in the door. "Jacobsson!" he shouted. No response. It was silent. Nobody, of course, was working on a Saturday night. He walked around the corner and saw the metal stairway leading up the back side of the building to the corridor where the office doors, the doors leading into the office buildings were. And he slowly walked up the metal stairs, holding onto the railings. "Jacobsson!" he shouted once again. No response. He finally made his way into the corridor and began to walk down the hallway. And he looked, and there at the end of the hallway was Jacobsson's office. And the door there was also slightly ajar. "Jacobsson!" Rather strange, he wasn't getting a response. So Ven slowly crept a little bit closer to the door. And when he got to the door, he immediately sensed something was wrong. He pushed the door open, and immediately he looked down, and there on the floor were papers strewn everywhere. The computer that Jacobsson had been using to do his research had been knocked over, and it was broken into small pieces, and there were large segments of the monitor and of the keyboard that had been thrown around. The file cabinet had also been tipped over, and files were pulled out and thrown all over the place. The board where they used to put up notes for their research ideas had been thrown down. Everything was ransacked, and the desk was flipped over, and everything was in a complete, total mess. And Jacobsson was nowhere to be found. And Ven suddenly felt his heart racing. That he knew that something terrible was happening. Instinctively, he pulled out his phone and began to dial 112, the emergency response system. And just then he froze in his tracks, because there, underneath the desk, he saw a blinking red light. Ven hung up and put down his phone, got down on his knees, and crept slowly around the edge of the desk. And as he looked up underneath, he noticed the worst thing he could ever imagine. A blinking light in a small black box with a few wires connected to it, leading into a massive cache of what he knew to be C4 plastic explosives. Ben suddenly jumped up, looking around. Where's Jacobsson? Where's Jacobsson? He's not here! But at this point he was in a panic, so he ran as fast as he could out of the door, the front door. Instead of going the back way, he ran the front way through the big hallway, the corridor, down the spiral staircase that was made out of wood, and running out the front door. And as he approached the entrance way, the big glass entrance way to the building, he felt the massive thud, and the sound wave and the air wave hit him as he looked back behind him and saw fire was crawling along the ceiling and shooting up above him from the C4 explosion. The entire office had just gone up in flames, the windows in the office blown out and fire flying out of the windows, and immediately the sprinkler system in the entire building turned on and started shooting water down. As he threw himself to the ground, he could feel the fire coming over the top on the ceiling as it followed the highest point in the building, and the flames and the heat was starting to burn his neck as he dragged himself through the entryway, and the door was locked, it was shut, and he slammed his arm through and sliced open his elbow as he tried to make it through the front door. And running out the front door, he collapsed as the flames started shooting out the front of the office door, and the whole building was on fire. Ven was lying there on the ground, and with now the rain also coming down on top of his head, panting from this amazing adrenaline rush that happened, looking around trying to find if Jacobsson was anywhere to be seen. He could not find him. The rain coming down on his head, panting in the distance. You could hear the sirens from the police. And he knew to be the police, and he knew to be the fire department. Already they had been notified about this, and they were driving out to meet him. And he stumbled down the stairs leading up to the building and collapsed down on the curb, panting, looking around for Jacobsson. Where is Jacobsson? And then in the corner of the parking lot, he saw a set of headlights turn on in a black car. A nondescript black car began to speed over towards him. It got closer and closer and closer and slammed on the brakes, coming to a skidding stop in front of him. And Ven stood up, bleeding now profusely from his elbow, for the massive gash had come, his head bruised from falling on the ground. And he stood up and looked at this black car, and suddenly a window started to slowly come down, and he heard a voice, "Ven!" And he looked closely. How did they know my name? "Ven, get in the car. This place is not safe. You are not safe here." Ven looked behind him. You could see the fire still pouring out of the building. You could hear the sirens in the distance. "Get in the car," came the voice again. And this time, when he looked back at the window, he could see the fire behind him, reflecting off of the shiny metal of what he knew to be the barrel of a gun, pointed right at him. The gun was cocked, and he heard the voice one more time. "Get in the car."